We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Yo guys! This is Uzumaki and this is part 9 of What If Naruto Was the Red Flash. Naruto finds out about Uzumaki clan when he was 4 years old. Naruto swears to rebuild the home of his clan and finds all the family he has left. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 53, Team Meeting. Naruto. His team walked inside the room, and they were immediately blasted by multi-killing intent. Every genin they're releasing their Ki trying to look intimidating. Sakura started shaking from the amount of Ki around her, while Sasuke just shrugged his shoulder but felt a slight weight around his body. While Naruto just looked bored, a smirk slowly made his way to his face and took a step forward. How about we give these people a taste of their own medicine? Naruto asked Kurama, who smirked slyly. Let's see how many won't pass out, Kurama replied. After saying that, Naruto leaked a tiny bit of Ki to be noticed by everyone, seeing almost everyone had turned in his direction. You call this killing intent? My grandma can do better than this, Naruto stated, and releasing half of his Ki, taking almost everyone by surprise. Some started falling unconscious immediately, their eyes almost popped out from their eye sockets, their face turned pale, but Naruto noticed a few groups that didn't look affected or less than the others. His senses spread and found the Shikaku Jinchuriki glaring at him, but keeping his Ki in check. His siblings looked pale and were shaking, but Naruto wasn't sure if it was because of him or Gaara. His senses found the Kyumo teams. Amongst them was Matatabi Jinchuriki. Yujito had her eyes on him, her tongue licking her red strawberry lips, wetting them. Her legs were slightly crossed, and her eyes almost looked like Matatabi's eyes. Her teammates looked slightly affected, except another one who looked interested in Naruto. The redhead couldn't recognize him, but he could feel this wasn't someone to be underestimated. Naruto's senses found Fu's team, and she, Ashera and their teammate were making their way towards them. But Naruto's then focused on the IWA shinobi across the room, who looked almost wanting to blank in the background and not be noticed. The one named Ikano had his eyes on Naruto. His focus was also on the Shikaku Jinchuriki. Naruto had to admit his ability to hide his chakra was impressive. The redhead could hardly feel his chakra. If it weren't for Kurama, perhaps he wouldn't be able to. His eyes found a group of shinobi from Sound Village. None of them looked impressive, except they had strange devices attached to their arms or palms. Naruto wondered where that village came from. He had never heard of it. His senses found a group from Rain Village. One of the girls was holding an angel figure made out of paper, something that Naruto found a bit odd. But Naruto's eyes widened when he checked another group from Sound Village. Two of them had an enormous amount of chakra, especially one of them, and his malice was beyond what Naruto had ever felt before. His chakra level was easily S-rank level, and the one next to him had much fewer malice tendencies, but his chakra level was elite Jonin level, or maybe even low S-rank. Naruto wondered if this was what Bachan meant when she told him to be extra careful and do not underestimate anyone and report if he sees anything unusual. Naruto wondered who the main guy was. Naruto didn't even glance in his direction. He didn't want them to get suspicious. The redhead knew the Akatsuki were after him, but he doubted they would risk being seen. Not mentioning Tojiji said they would start capturing them after 3 years, which gave Naruto plenty of time to prepare. Naruto's senses detected 2 teams of emotionless shinobi standing at the far left corner of the room. They had no emotions in their body. Naruto wondered what Danzo wanted, perhaps trying to capture him or anyone from other villages or eliminate them. But Naruto detected that one of them had no chakra. At that moment, the redhead felt a slight shiver in his body. This guy could hide his chakra even from him, and he hid his emotions, made it useless to try and detect him through emotions. Kurama, how is this possible? Naruto mentally asked, since even the likes of Jiraiya couldn't hide from him, unless this shinobi was using a different type of chakra he couldn't detect. I don't know, Naruto, your Uzumaki senses are already too good, and me enhancing them should have made it almost impossible for anyone to hide, Kurama replied, just as irritated and confused. The demon fox, of course, knew a couple of shinobi throughout history that would be able to hide even from Naruto's senses, like Hashirama Senju, Roku Uzumaki, Arthur Uzumaki, Kenji the Fire Breather Uzumaki, Elixo Kitsueki from Kiri, Anaruki Haimai and his own father, Hagoromo Otsutsuki. Naruto's attention then went to the second group from Sound Village. He could feel another Uzumaki, his eyes widened, and a smile erupted on his face. His eyes glanced to the far right side of the room. His eyes saw the girl with red hair with glasses standing, but her eyes were glancing at him every now and then. Naruto wanted to talk to her. It wasn't every day that he found an Uzumaki, but he heard a shout just then. Naruto-kun's hands were crossed around his neck from behind, her blonde hair covering his right shoulder. As she rubbed her cheek against his face, Naruto couldn't help but blush at the feeling of her soft breasts against his back. And a sensation was growing on his pants. "Ah, hi Ino, it's been some time," Naruto said, feeling awkward from the close contact with the kunoichi. "Hi, Naruto, how have you been?" Shikamaru said, walking closer, followed by Choji and teammate. "Good to see you again, Shika and Choji. Prepare for the exams?" Shikamaru just shrugged his shoulders, not really that focused on the exams, while Choji was busy eating chips. "We are kind of ready, if you ask me. We should have waited until the following year, but life is troublesome," Shika replied lazily, rubbing his neck. "Everything is troublesome to you, Shikamaru," Ino shouted, angry at him. Shika just rolled his eyes and raised his hands in surrender. "I'm sorry for speaking, Your Majesty." Before Naruto could ask more, they heard footsteps and turned to see Team 8 walking towards them. "We will soon have our rematch, Naruto, better be ready," Kiba said with a slightly high voice, but Naruto thought he sounded ridiculous. "Naruto-kun," Hinata nervously said as she played with her finger, her face as red as his hair. She saw Ino clenching on Naruto's back, her eyes slightly twitching at the bold blonde Ino. Naruto sighed quietly that Hinata still hadn't moved on from her crush. He hoped she at least has trained in taijutsu or maybe ninjutsu. His attention turned back to Kiba. "No offense, dog breath, but you won't be much of a challenge," Naruto stated with a sly grin on his face. Kiba's face turned red from anger. "Why is that tomato?" Kiba demanded, taking a step closer, completely ignoring the barks of Akamaru telling him to not mess with Naruto and get them in trouble before the exams even started. "Because Naruto is the strongest one of us, and you Kiba stand absolutely no chance," Shino stated with his usual nothing but spitting facts kind of tone. Kiba turned to Shino. "Hey, you're taking his side now," he barked angrily. Before their discussion could escalate further. "How are you doing, Naruto-kun?" Everyone turned to see Fu arriving, followed by Asha, who was glaring daggers at Ino, while the third teammate had his eyes closed and was quietly snoring. "Fu-chan, Asha-chan, is good to see you," Naruto said warmly, something that was noticed by Ino and Hinata. The Hyuga heiress couldn't help but notice the warm and soft tone Naruto used when he talked with the new girls. She wondered who they were and if any of them had stolen his heart. Ino narrowed her eyes at the new girls and didn't help that Naruto made her let go of his warm back. Not only was he handsome, but just the feeling of his body also made her want to hug him tightly like a pillow. Sasuke noticed Ashera and wondered how strong she was. If she was anything like Naruto, he wouldn't be surprised if she was a much better kunoichi than a certain pink-haired girl. "Who are your friends, Naruto?" "Wait, red hair, are these the girls you mentioned?" Shikamaru said, remembering that Naruto had talked that he had 2 friends from Taki village. His eyes saw their emblem tightened around the arm of the green-haired girl, around the waist of the redhead and around the shoulder of the third one who looked to be sleeping while standing. "Interesting," Shikamaru thought. "Indeed they are, everyone. These are my friends Fu, Ashera and Akashu," Naruto replied, and he took a step forward towards Asha. Everyone greeted them in return, even Sasuke. "Did you notice the Uzumaki girl on the right side?" Naruto whispered in her ear. Fu heard him as well. Asha said nothing but nodded her head in agreement. Shikamaru found it odd but thought that it was nothing troublesome. In another corner, Team Guy was looking at the exchange between Naruto and Team Taki. Lee had to admit that Naruto had quite a good taste for women, while Niji narrowed his eyes. Just the thought of her angered him, let alone seeing her here. But in the end, it wouldn't matter, the fate had chosen him the winner. While this was happening, a certain red-haired girl couldn't keep her eyes away from the redheads talking together. She knew her senses weren't lying to her, but she still couldn't believe that there were more Uzumaki in the world. Her eyes instinctively glanced in the direction of her master but immediately moved her eyes away. A cold shiver spread in her entire body, crawling her skin, and her throat felt as dry as the deserts of Suna. Despite seeing them, she couldn't believe it, but Orochimaru-sama said there were no other Uzumaki. She reminded herself, did her master lie? She quickly shook her head in denial. No, Orochimaru-sama would never do this, she told herself repeatedly. Her hand touched the cursed mark on her left shoulder, close to her neck. The cursed mark looked like a whirlpool, except for lines coming together in the center. They looked like dark chains. Karen turned to look at the Uzumaki duo again and wondered if she could just go over there and introduce herself as a member of the Uzumaki clan. The thought of her clan made her remember. One day, Karen, you will find your family, the will of life still lives inside you. Karen felt saddened when she remembered the bite marks of her mother, and now the same thing was happening to her. But Orochimaru-sama saved me. I owe it to him, she told herself. In a corner, Iwa Shinobi was looking at Naruto Senju. Ikano looked at the Senju with narrowed eyes, his right hand covered in bandages shaking slightly, something his sister noticed. "Ik," she murmured and pointed the finger at his hand. He put his left hand on top of it, the shaking stopped. "Do you see it?" His sister suddenly asked, looking at the Senju like an eagle looks at his prey. "Indeed I do." "Do you think the old man knows?" Ikano asked, seeing his Yami level was still balanced. That caught him by surprise. Since the kid from Suna had his Yami level almost completed, he wondered what memories or good people were keeping him from entirely falling over the edge. Usually, Jinchurikis had that kind of Yami level because of their treatment, but the Senju differed. "I don't think he knows, but even if he does, should we kill him?" "You know what his F." She stopped mid-sentence when Ikano raised his hand to stop her. "You know how I feel about revenge. We are not like Sayako, we don't know the real story," Ikano said with a slightly high tone and his hand on her shoulder. Despite being told from a young age that their parents died protecting Iwa from the barbaric Minato Namikes, your father died protecting Iwa from his enemies. Minato slaughtered men, women and children without mercy. That was the usual response from the sisters in the orphanage. They would tell them that Iwa only protected their territory, and Konoha attacked without any provocation. But Ikano couldn't help but ask himself, why Iwa is still standing. From their words, Minato the Yellow Flash slaughtered the army, but why didn't he just advance further into Land of Stone territory and completely conquer it, to that last rock? "Calm down, Firecracker, no need to get all red," Lolja said as she was eyeing someone from the Konoha team. Before Ikano could say anything, they heard a voice, and he turned to see a guy with glasses walking over to the Konoha teams. Naruto saw the glasses guy slowly advancing towards them. Much to his surprise, he had a Konoha emblem on his forehead. "You should try to be quiet, you are gaining too much attention to yourself," the guy said, smirking slyly at them. The others saw that everyone indeed was looking at them, except Naruto and Ashura, who could feel them. "And you are?" Sasuke asked, not liking the smirk on his face. "My name is Kabuto Yakushi. As you have noticed, there are quite a few outstanding teams this year and even better candidates," he stated, raising his arms. That took the attention of everyone in the room. Almost everyone leaned closer to listen. "Kabuto, you say? I don't think I have ever seen you before," Naruto stated, his voice a hint of accusation. "Well, you see, I don't really like that much to be in the spotlight." He started rubbing his neck nervously. "Then why are you talking with us?" "Right now, you're in the center of the spotlight," Naruto retorted. "You just remind me of my old team, and since you're so young, I thought a few hints on how to complete the exams were needed," Kabuto answered, feeling as if Naruto was interrogating him, and it didn't help that Naruto was leaking a bit of his ki. "Why? How many times you have been in Chunin exams?" Sakura asked. Since from his words, it must mean that he had been in Chunin exams before. "This is my 7th time, actually." This caught by surprise almost everyone. Sakura felt even more insecure. What if she disappointed her team? How could she look at Sasuke if they lost because of her? In increasing insecurity, Hinata slightly lowered her head, but she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Shino. "Don't worry, Hinata, you're stronger than you think," he stated with a genuine smile on his face. Hinata smiled back and turned to look at Kabuto. "Wow, you must really suck," Kiba mocked him. "Or the exams are just that hard," Naruto retorted, but couldn't help but feel the malice coming from him, and his chakra level was high jonin, and not mentioning he smelled of snakes. "You said you could help us, how would you do that?" Ino asks, hoping for any advantage. "And you're asking the guy who lost 6 times for help," Shikamaru said sarcastically, earning a glare from Ino. Kabuto ignored the pineapple head and pulled out cards from his pocket. The cards were white blank. "With these?" "What are they?" Sasuke asked, looking interested. "These are ninja info cards. If I add chakra, it will reveal to me every information I have gathered throughout the years and about the teams participating this year." Making the card on his finger show a bunch of hidden village symbols with numbers near them. "What is this list?" Sakura asked. "This shows how many teams are from each village. There are 9 Konoha teams, 1 Suna team, 2 Sound teams, 1 Iwa team, 3 Rain Village team, 2 Kyumo teams and several teams from minor villages," Kabuto stated, causing Niji to get closer when he heard that Kyumo had teams in the Chunin exams. "That's quite a lot of information you have," Naruto said with a hidden meaning that Kabuto noticed. "What can the other cards do?" Shikamaru was finding this whole thing troublesome. In basic terms, they're cards with information burnt into them using my chakra. I've gathered information on this exam for the past 4 years. Meaning I have got a lot of information on many different people and places, stated Kabuto, where he then started to explain what the Chunin exam was all about. Once Kabuto had finished explaining what the exam was about, Sasuke decided to ask a question. You say that you've information on a lot of different people. Does that mean you've information on the combatants in this exam? Yes, I do. Is there someone you're interested in? Asked the boy, with a ghost of a smirk, where Sasuke just nodded. Well, the information I've on this year's examinees is not perfect, but I've burnt and saved them onto my cards, which includes all of you, stated Kabuto. Now tell me what you can about these people you're interested in, and I look them up for you, said Kabuto. Gaara of Hidden Sand, Rock Lee of Hidden Leaf, Ashera Uzumaki of Takigakure and Naruto Uzumaki of Hidden Leaf, spoke Sasuke. At hearing this, Naruto looked at Sasuke with a bit of surprise since he could understand why he was interested in Gaara, given Naruto had warned him about him, as well as Lee. But Naruto had not expected Sasuke to ask about Ashera. Hearing this, Ashera narrowed her eyes at him and turned to look at the guy. I want information on Ikono Ijenka of Iwakure, Ikamana Ijenka of IWA, and Luljalataka of IWA. Ashera spoke. When he listened to the names, Kabuto almost froze. Everyone knew the Ijenka clan died during the first ninja war. This caused Yujito and her team to walk closer. She approached and stood close to Naruto, who noticed her well-developed body, especially. Bad Naruto, stop it, stop being like Erogigi. Naruto beat himself mentally while Kurama laughed like crazy. Hello Yujito, couldn't help yourself. Naruto started smiling with a warm tone. You know I'm quite curious for my own sake, she replied with a slight lick of her lips and swaying her hips slightly, something Kiba immediately noticed. What is your name, beautiful chick? How about you spend time with an alpha? Kiba walked closer, his arms spread out and his chest high. This caused Naruto to snicker slightly when Kiba turned to Naruto. Any problems, tomato? Kiba asked, trying to sound intimidating. Nothing, dog breath, be careful. You might as well explode from trying to raise your chest, and she's more of a cat person, Naruto replied. Yujito giggled slightly from the red face of Kiba, who was clenching his teeth and glaring at Naruto. Do you have any information? Sasuke suddenly demanded, looking at Kabuto. You know their names, then this will be easy, replied Kabuto, where he took out 4 cards from his deck and then channeled chakra into it. After which, a small puff of smoke came from the card, where a profile and picture of Lee appeared on the card. Let's start with Rock Lee, said Kabuto. Now he is 1 year older than you. He has done 20 D rank missions and 11 C rank missions. He's Team Sensei in Mato Gai. He has an extremely high hand-to-hand combat skills, but all his other skills are terrible. Last year, he gained much attention as a highly skilled rookie genin but didn't take the Chunin exam. Like you, this is his first time taking the exam. His teammates are last year's top Kunoichi Tenten and last year's Rookie of the Year Hyuga Niji, who is rumored to be a highly gifted prodigy like yourself. At the mention of Niji's name, a worried look appeared on Hinata's face, although no one noticed it except Shino. Next Sabaku no Gaara, Gaara of the Sand Waterfall, spoke Kabuto, and he got another card and channeled chakra into it. Now he is the same age as you and has done 8 C rank missions and, this is amazing, he has done a B rank mission as a genin, said a surprised Kabuto. This caught quite a few by surprise. Except for Yujito, Fu, Naruto and Ashera, who knew to never underestimate a Jinchuriki. But is said that he never received as much of a scratch from any of his missions. Teammates are Kankuro and Temari. Kabuto finished taking everyone by surprise. Naruto had to give it to Gaara. That must be Shikaka's ultimate defense that Kurama had told him about. Ashera Uzumaki, she has completed 31 D missions, 3 C missions, 1 B mission and what's this 1 A rank mission? Her speciality is chakra chains, and she's called a prodigy in Kenjutsu. Her teammates are Fu of Taki, and Akashu Hoshi. Kabuto stated. Every eye was on Ashera, whose face darkened at the mention of a rank mission. Naruto noticed her sudden change of emotions, but he noticed that Fu looked just as confused as him. Kabuto pulled the 4th letter. Now, Naruto Uzumaki Senju has completed 53 D rank missions, 6 C missions, 1 A rank mission and 1 South rank mission, he said, earning gasps from everyone. Naruto figured that when he executed Mizuki, that counted as S rank. Sakura and Sasuke looked at Naruto, confused about what S rank mission he was talking about. His speciality is Fuinjutsu, Kenjutsu, Taijutsu and Ninjutsu. He only sucks at Genjutsu. Naruto narrowed his eyes dangerously. Does he know? The redhead asked himself. He's good at wind-style jutsus, and he also knows a few fire jutsus. His teammates are Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno. Kabuto finished. Naruto stopped his Ki when he understood that Kabuto didn't know about his empty seal Fuinjutsu, and especially for his secret Fuinjutsu. Kabuto then pulled out the fifth letter and revealed information for Ikono Igenka. Now for Ikono, he has. Kabuto stopped talking when he saw that his information about Ikono was blank. So? Naruto turned to see the IWA shinobi had approached them. He saw Ikono smirking at the blank paper. What information do you have for me? Ikono further asked, looking down at Kabuto. The said guy was sweating from his forehead. Just the way his chakra felt was as if there were two types, which is impossible unless he's a Jinchuriki, and Iwa's Jinchuriki were, Rashi, who's around his 50s, red hair, and Han, who's at his early 40s. Kabuto said nothing but pulled out the sixth card, but again, no information even for his teammate. Pulling the seventh card revealed decent information for Lulja. Kabuto sighed in relief. Well, Lulja Lataka has completed no D, C, or B rank missions but only 7 A rank missions. Her speciality is a new earth style, called earth walking. Her teammates are Ikono Igenka and Ikamane Igenka. Kabuto, earning a slap on the shoulder from Lulja. You forgot to mention that I like handsome men. 4 eyes, she pouted. This caused a few eyebrows to rise. That's quite useful information you have there, Kabuto. If I didn't know any better, I would say you're an excellent spy, Naruto stated, with his hand on his shoulder. Kabuto was caught off guard by his speed. When did he get to me? He thought and saw that everyone was looking at him with suspicion. Would you mind giving me information? Naruto asked with a warm tone, releasing his Ki. His grip on his shoulder started hurting. Yes, sure. I want information in a red hair with glasses and is from Hidden Sound Village, Naruto demanded. Kabuto felt like a prisoner right now. He felt his whole body sweat. Why is he so strong? He grabbed the 8th card. Karen Uzumaki, she has completed 9 D missions, 2 C missions, and 1 B mission. Her speciality is healing, and that's it, he said. Naruto's eyes went to Karen, and he wondered why she was suddenly avoiding him. Before anyone could say anything else, a large explosion happened in front of the class, revealing a man standing almost 2 meters tall. Alright, worthless maggots, playtime is over. Chapter 54, Writing Exam. Naruto. Everyone went quiet for a moment, then suddenly rushed to take a seat. Naruto sat in a chair and just waited for the exam to start. Taking his seat, he saw that the person who took the seat at his table was none other than Yujito. 5 minutes later, all of the genins had been seated in their pre-designated seats, completely separating the members of each team. He was stealing glances around him to try and map the seating system of the room. He noted many Konoha Chunin all around the room, sitting in chairs and intently watching every genin. At that moment, Ibiki Marino, their examiner, coughed, gaining attention from every participant. Listen closely. There are many important rules for this first test. I'll write them on the board while explaining them. However, questions are not allowed. He looked over the nervous genin and grinned mercilessly. The first rule, all participants start with 10 points, corresponding with 10 questions in the test. This test uses a subtraction system, meaning if you answer all questions correctly, you'll end up with 10 points. For any failed question, you lose 1 point. The second rule, this is a team test. Your passing is based on the combined score of your teammates. The third rule, anyone caught cheating during the exam will have 2 points subtracted for every offense. For that purpose, we have testing officers spread all around the room. If you lose all your points for cheating, you'll be asked to leave. Ibiki explained, his hand with the chalk moving up and down the board. Naruto was listening closely to the speech with a frown. You have to realize that the ones who are pathetic enough to get caught cheating will be destroying themselves. As shinobi trying to achieve the level of Chunin, be proud ninjas. Oh, and the final rule, those that lose all their points, either by getting caught cheating or failing to answer, will be failed along with their teammates. The last rule caused the whole room to break out in sweat and murmurs, Sakura furiously banging her head on the desk and even Sasuke widening his eyes in surprise. Naruto recalled one piece of information he had heard from Enko before concerning Ibiki Marino, his current examiner. Ibiki Marino, the best and, at the same time, worst, interrogator of the Konoha Torture and Interrogation Force. What the hell is this kind of person doing here? The exam will last 1 hour. You can turn the tests around and begin. Naruto hastily glanced at the test and read the first question. You are in a situation where the enemy used wind release. Great Sickle Weasel Jutsu against you, and the only jutsu in your arsenal is Fire Release, Great Fireball Jutsu. Will you be able to win? Explain, the hell? What kind of question is that? It's too hard for a genin. Of course, the fire element is stronger against the wind. However, you have to take the level of the technique into account. If the wind jutsu is a higher rank, then you can win, but only then. The Great Fireball is a C rank but can be stronger the more influential the user who uses it. But still, the problem doesn't specify how strong the user is, so the answer is the Fire Jutsu. Second question. You are standing on the ground, you see several opponents surrounding you, the only jutsu at disposal in your arsenal is Shadow Clone, Wind-style Great Breakthrough, and Fire-style Fireball. Naruto stopped reading and massaged his temples. He reread the question, and he understood it. First, use Shadow Clone and make another clone. With that done, make the clone use Wind-style while you use Fireball to burn down the area along with any enemy left around. These can't be questions for a genin. Even Shikamaru would have trouble with this, and he's loads smarter than I am. There has to be something. He glanced up at the examiner and the testing officers around the room. Now that I think about it, it doesn't make sense that they would let us cheat 4 times before sacking us out. Why wouldn't they sack us immediately? Why? Briefly gazing over the rest of the questions, Naruto swallowed hard. Hearing the testing officer on his far right scribbling something, he mentally cursed. I'm missing something. I'm missing something. Again, the examiner is a sadistic interrogator, and we have enough chances to cheat. What does that tell me? And what was with those final words? The ones who are pathetic enough to get caught cheating will be destroying themselves. As shinobi trying to achieve the level of Chunin, be proud ninjas, yeah, of course, we would be destroying ourselves. Kakashi's face told him something showed itself in Naruto's mind, and he widened his eyes. Of course. A ninja should look underneath the underneath. If they tell us cheating would cost us everything, it's the same when on a dangerous mission where you either gather information or die. This is not a test of intelligence but one of the ability to gather information with our skills. It makes sense. Naruto thought with a slight grin, but then it faltered. Sasuke has Sharingan, and Sakura has her wits, we should be fine. The minutes passed quickly, and many genin got caught and expelled from the exams. Some of them tried to resist, but every single one of them was mercilessly kicked out. Naruto ignored it all and, after successfully answering the question, he saw he didn't answer 2 of the questions. With that done, his hand touched the table underneath in front of him, leaving a seal underneath it. The word slowly moved away, and the seal reached the guy closest to him. The seal stopped shifting once it reached his chest, and spread creating branches. Yujito had to give Naruto credit, he looked pretty intelligent, especially his move under the table. Yujito didn't see why he did it but figured there was a reason for it. She turned her head, and her eyes turned to split like Matatabi's eyes. From the corner of her eyes, she could see the words of a student below their level. Despite being very far away, she could see and read the words as if he was just in front of her. Matatabi's eyes allowed her to see very far, even see the details of a coin from a mile away. Yujito smiled as she started writing in the test. Sasuke activated his Sharingan, copying the movement of the student in front of his table. Beside him was Lulja Lataka, who closed her eyes. She could feel the vibrations of the class around her, and even the vibration caused every time the pen touched the paper. Her hand moved to the first question and started writing one by one. Karen did nothing but write the symbol of Uzumaki and wrote a seal around it. The seal completed, her red eyes glanced at everyone in the room, her eyes noticed Naruto Uzumaki. Karen thought that that was his name, and a chakra chain came out from underneath her foot, reaching the redhead. The seal in her paper disappeared, and soon the answers were written in her paper. She quickly disappeared her chakra chains but wondered whenever or not had Naruto noticed her and just let her copy the answers, or he didn't notice her. That would be pretty disappointing for an Uzumaki. Fu just smiled at the answers, her insect spread around the room, and returned, giving her the information she needed. She even hacked one of Shino's insects. Ashera created a small mirror water jutsu in front of her right palm. With her left palm, she made another small mirror around the pink-haired girl. Asha noticed she did not once look distressed, so she figured she must know the answers. The mirror around Sakura showed the view in the mirror to her palm. Seeing that she had already answered every question, she started writing her answers. Gaara put his hand on his left eye, an eye made of sand appeared around the shoulder of a student, and he started writing the answers. Shikamaru was in a deep sleep, same for Akashu of Fu's team, who was snoring but writing simultaneously. The sound ninja Dosu used the sound wave around him to read the answers from the ninjas around him. Ikano of IWA said nothing and did nothing as his whole right eye turned as dark as the darkest abyss, no white scara, only dark. He looked at the shinobi in front of him, who had dark hair and an Uchiha symbol on his back. Sasuke Uchiha, let's see what you made of, he thought, and just as he predicted, his Yami level was above average. He wondered what would make him just tip over the edge. Niji quickly used his Byakugan, and so did Hinata, who got her answers copied from Shino. While Akamaru was above Kiba's head, his eyes looked at the solutions and barked at Kiba, answering him. Ino used her clan's technique and took over Sakura's body and started answering one by one. Later, she would help Choji since she knew that Shika had already answered all the questions. Jitego looked at the questions. You must be fucking kidding. He silently cursed his stupid sensei for bringing him here. In his own brilliant mind, Kyumo would receive popularity if they won Chunin exams, popularity they lost when someone had the bright idea to kidnap a child from a compound filled with people who can literally see through walls and everything. It didn't make sense whatsoever. With that thought done, he started answering every question he could. Kankuro had gone to the toilet during all this. When he returned, Ibiki turned to him. I hope you find your trip enlightening, Princess, Ibiki commented. I'm a boy, sir, and is just war paint, Kankuro corrected, running out of patience that everyone was mistaking him for a girl. Could have fooled me. Boys usually don't wear makeup and don't play with dolls, Ibiki answered with a clear indication that he knew what he did, and his right hand had 2 fingers raised, showing that 2 more missteps and he's out along with his team. Kankuro walked back to his seat. Temari could hardly contain her laughter. Kankuro murmured traitor under his breath. Naruto finished his final question. He had noticed the chakra chain of Karen and even felt the guilt, but it was a good sign. He was happy to know she knew Fuinshitsu, and Uzumaki who didn't know Fuinshitsu wouldn't make sense. Kakashi. Meanwhile, in the Jonin lounge, Kakashi, Gai, Kurenai, and Asuma were all relaxing as their students took the exam. Might Gai was beside Kakashi, Kurenai and Asuma sat near each other, across from Kakashi. Asuma took a long drag off of his cigarette before looking to the copy ninja. Eesh, you really screwed that one up, Kakashi, Asuma said with a slightly amused expression after Kakashi explained precisely what happened during the wave mission. Putting a team of green genin through a mess like that without even calling for backup. I bet the old man tore you a new one. Kakashi chuckled sheepishly and rubbed the back of his head. Well, we all make mistakes, right? And everything turned out fine in the end. I notice you didn't answer my question. Asuma pointed out with a grin. Don't you think it is a little unfair that you used to train Naruto, and you have him in your team? Kurenai started looking at the one-eyed shinobi. Last time I checked, Kurenai, all your genins come from clans, right? That statement immediately ended the argument. That was true, and they could always look for extra help from their families. In fact, Asuma mainly had left it to his students' clans to train them and subsequently got chewed out by his father himself for passing the buck. Even Hinata could have sought additional help from her clan. Though she was viewed poorly by her father and the clan's elders, many among her family found her kind-hearted nature endearing and would be more than willing to help her. Naruto and Sasuke, being orphans, and Sakura, being raised by a civilian mother, did not have this opportunity. Things are going to be boring for the next month. We can't even carry out missions while our students take on the exam, Kakashi complained, the usual lazy expression he tended to wear holding a hint of boredom. Now you know how I feel. I can't wait for this damn probationary period to be over, Gai said to the copy ninja, grumbling at the end. But I have to agree, this is dull. At least before I had something to do. Asuma chuckled. Ah, don't worry. Those kids might be back sooner than you think. HM. Do you know something we don't, Asuma? Kakashi asked. Asuma shrugged. Just that word is the examiner for the first stage happens to be Ibiki. Gai sat up and frowned. Ibiki? Ibiki Marino? The very same, Asuma replied. Kakashi's usual, aloof expression gained a hint of concern. They put them with that sadist from the start. Kurenai's brow furrowed, not liking the sound of that and slightly worried about her team. Sadist? Gai raised a brow. You've never heard of him. She's a new jonin, and unlike you, she never met him before. Not surprising, she never heard of him, Asuma pointed out with a grin. Kurenai rolled her eyes at the slight dig on her status as a newbie. So, who is he? An expert. Asuma began, taking another puff of his stick before turning and looking at the sole kunoichi in the room. Of torture and interrogation. The special jonin, Ibiki Marino of Konoha's T&I department. Don't worry, there won't be anything physical. That's not where his skills lie. His area of expertise is mental torture. Kakashi wasn't worried for his team, but he wondered why he just had a bad feeling like everything would soon come crashing down on top of him like a boulder. Naruto. He glanced at the 10th and final question and grimaced. It was almost time. He was spot on as the examiner turned around and spoke. Okay. All of you must have noticed the 10th question. It's time for it. His head finally leaving the test form, Naruto realized that the number of genin had drastically lowered, and barely half of them were still present. That was one thing he liked, but the thing he certainly didn't like was the examiner's sadistic grin. For this 10th question, I'll have to add a few additional rules. I call them rules of desperation. First rule, you must decide whether you will or will not take it. What? Sakura couldn't hold her emotions anymore and yelled in anger. It's quite simple. Either you choose to take the question, but if you fail, not only you will lose the exam but will be forbidden ever to take the exam ever again, or you can choose not to take it and, in that case, your points will be reduced to 0, and you will fail, along with the rest of your team. The silence that followed after that was more than loud. The absence of any sound was so loud, the beads broke it of sweat dripping from the contestants' foreheads. What kind of stupid rule is that? Something like that has never been on the exams before. Some genin angrily asked. The rest of them gulped when the examiner started to chuckle darkly. Too bad for you, brats. You were simply unlucky. This year, I'm the examiner. However, as I told you, you have a way out. Just forfeit and try again next year. Yujito felt uncomfortable and intense. She knew she would most likely know the answer, but what about Karui and Omoi? They would never forgive her if they failed because of her. Her hands started shaking, and her eyes checked Omoi and Karui, who were both pale and trembling. She then noticed that Naruto looked as bored as a person could get, his hands behind his neck, his head resting on the head of the chair. Ibiki saw many were calculating in their minds if they should surrender or try. He grinned evilly, but then his eyes found the redhead without a hint of fear in his entire body. Redhead, you're not afraid, Ibiki challenged him. He thought that the kid was either a moron or intelligent or a bit of both. Why would I be afraid? If words are all you can give us, go ahead, give me your stupid question. You think I'm afraid to end up a genin my whole life? Well, you should know I never give up. What kind of shinobi I would be if I surrender at the first blockade in front of me, and I don't need the title Chunin to achieve my dream. I will be known as the strongest genin ever, Naruto exclaimed and slammed his open hand on the table. This caught mixed reactions from everyone. Yujito smiled and took the courage back. Sasuke had to give it to Naruto. He definitely knew how to talk. Sakura smiled and was really glad to have Naruto in the same team. Well said, Naruto, Shikamaru murmured with a smile. Ibiki saw the mood had been broken and saw one by one getting back their courage back. Interesting kid, he thought, and saw that no one would surrender anymore. Is this your final answer? Ibiki shouted and saw many gulps but still stood their ground. Then. Everyone who is still here has officially passed the test, he declared. For a moment, no one said anything, not even a whimper, when suddenly the shouts exploded. Temari stood up. What do you mean we passed? Does that mean everything we did so far was bullshit? Jitego agreed immediately. You haven't understood it, have you? Ibiki said and started explaining the real meaning of the test. Yujito glanced at Naruto beside her, and a smile erupted on her face. She owed to him for passing the test. Ibiki explained that the first part was to see how they would get information, and the second part was to see how much they would risk passing a blockade in their road. Before anyone could celebrate, Ibiki turned his gaze to the window, his expression dropping as he sensed something very familiar rapidly approaching. The very next instant, the window shattered as what appeared to be a black ball of cloth burst into the room, causing a nearby Chunin to jump and a few genins unlucky enough to be nearby to shield their faces as shards rained down on them. That's... spoke Naruto, sitting up in his seat, having immediately recognized this entrance. The ball unfurled in front of a slightly annoyed Ibiki, sticking to the floor and sealing with kunai. Once fully opened, it revealed itself to be a banner reading "The Sexy and Taken Proctor of the Second Exam, Anko Mitarashi." The woman herself stood before the flag with her hands in her coat pockets. Her clothes were very revealing. More than a few males in her audience had trouble keeping their attention off her assets, several had blushed and, in a few cases, nosebleeds. Alright, you brats. This is no time to celebrate. Anko shouted to the test takers, waving her arm with her usual dramatic flair. "I'm Enko Mitarashi, the proctor for the second stage of the Chunin exams. Now let's go. Follow me." She pumped her fist in the air. Silence followed this declaration. Ibiki, clearly annoyed, stepped out from behind the banner. "Bad timing, Enko. You're early, again." This caused Enko to blush in embarrassment while Naruto snickered at the expressions of both special jonin. Enko rubbed the back of her head and chuckled sheepishly before actually looking at the Chunin hopefuls. Taking a quick tally, she frowned. 78. She wheeled on her fellow special jonin. "What the hell, Ibiki? You let 26 teams pass?" She then grinned. "Looks like someone's getting soft." "Actually, you've got that brat to thank for all the extras," Ibiki responded, pointing to Naruto. "Ha!" Enko raised a brow before following Ibiki's gaze and seeing the redhead. "Hey, Enko. I was wondering when you'd show up," Naruto called out with a grin, which Enko returned. "Well, if it isn't my favorite redhead. Figured you'd get through Ibiki's game, but what's this I hear about you being responsible for all the extra baggage?" she asked, putting a hand on her hip. The redhead shrugged. It's not like I did much. I just said a few words, and all the wannabes who were ready to back out sat back down." The purple-haired Kunoichi chuckled at that, while Naruto's teammates looked at the young Uzumaki in slight confusion. How does he know her? I mean, she acts kind of like him, but when did they meet? Sakura wondered. "Well, don't worry, more than half of them will be out once I'm done with them," Enko chuckled darkly, much to the horror of some of them. "Now, I want everyone in front of Training Ground 44 within 20 minutes, or you're disqualified," Enko stated and disappeared. Everyone still was seated except Naruto, who stood up immediately. "She 100% meant that," he said and left quickly, followed by the others. Ibiki started collecting the papers after everyone left and reached the paper of Uzumaki Naruto. He wasn't surprised to see his page was completed, but he read in the end. Amongst the genins are 2 shinobi with chakra above elite jonin, and 1 Kabuto Yakushi has a lot of information that should be inaccessible. His eyes widened, and he rushed towards the Hokage Tower. Later, every team that passed the first team were in front of a vast fence. The fence was surrounded by seals everywhere, except the gates. There were many gates around the area. Enko grinned sadistically at the teams that had gathered. Naruto noticed the grin and just looked at the forest behind the fence. "What is this place?" Sakura asked, feeling fear. The forest looked dark. "This is the Forest of Death." Chapter 55, The Forest of Death. All the genin teams arrived at Training Ground 44, where the second part of the Chunin exams would be held. Naruto was standing with his teammates, observing everything around him. There were a total of around 23 teams that were going to be taking part in this round. He was also waiting for further information on what they were going to do in this round. He could see some Chunin and Jounin level shinobi standing there. But what got his attention were the Umbu officers that were present. One thing he realized was that this round was not going to be easy like the last one. He had heard quite a lot about this particular training ground. It was dangerous, and only Chunin and above level shinobi had permission to enter the field. But he didn't know what made this training ground so difficult. At that moment, Enko decided to announce the rules and couldn't wait to see just how many would die. Welcome to Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death. My name is Enko Mitarashi, and I will be your proctor for the second round. Before we begin this test, I have something to hand out to you all. She took out forms from her jacket and continued, "These are just standard consent forms. Before the test, you all have to read over this form and sign it." Yujito asked in confusion, "But why do we have to sign it?" Enko smirked, and her tongue licked her lips slowly, making many male shinobi blush, and not mentioning her arms were crossed under her bust, making them look bigger. "There's a very high chance of death involved in this. Some of you may not come back, and by signing it, you agree that you will be taking part in this round at your own risk. Neither I nor the Leaf Village will take responsibility if anything happens to any of you in the forest," she said while grinning evilly. Most of the genins gulped after hearing her say that, and some of them hesitated to continue the exams. Enko noticed that Naruto wasn't paying any attention to her. While she would bet all her life savings that Naruto would reach the final, that didn't mean that the brat shouldn't pay her attention. Her hand reached a kunai. She knew Naruto would probably see her doing this. He was trained by Kakashi for 4 years after all, but where was the harm in having some fun? She threw the kunai towards his left cheek with an evil smirk, but Naruto suddenly put two of his fingers and caught it midair. Many genins around gasped at seeing him catching a kunai with that speed. Sasuke narrowed his eyes slightly. He hadn't seen the kunai coming, while Sakura looked horrified, her eyes searching for whoever threw the kunai. Anko suddenly appeared behind Naruto, her impressive bust pressed against his back. Naruto couldn't help but blush slightly from the close contact with his big brother's lover. "I see you weren't paying attention, little brat, those that don't usually are the first to die." Slowly she whispered in his ear and dragged the word slowly. Naruto chuckled at her words. "You don't need to worry, Anko-chan, after all, Big Bro Kakashi did train me," Naruto replied, and feeling malice intent coming from behind them. Naruto's muscle tensed immediately, something Anko noticed and moved away. Her eyes saw Naruto glaring at someone behind her. Her eyes glanced behind to see a woman. At first glance, she looked normal, but Anko couldn't help but feel uneasy at her presence. She also noticed someone standing close to her, a male with what she thought were white hair since he was wearing a round hat, covering his head, with little snake figures hanging at the edge of the cap. The hat was made of straw, with a thin white rope around the top. Anko walked back to her old position. Most of the students hadn't noticed her or Naruto eyeing the grass shinobi team, except a few who had glanced in their direction and seeing nothing amiss except a certain IWA shinobi. "Interesting, but I wonder what are the likes of him doing here. If he's here, that means Orochimaru is taking this invasion plan seriously. I wonder what the old man would say," Akano thought. "Well, if you, please hurry so that I can explain what you're going to do in the forest," the proctor spoke once again. Naruto had no hesitation on his face, he was not going to back down from it. He was fully confident in himself. He also had complete confidence in both his teammates that they were capable of handling anything. Even Sakura. He looked at them and asked, "Are you guys ready?" "Yeah." They both said to him with grins. They took their forms and signed them without reading them. Sasuke cracked his knuckles, he felt ready to complete this second challenge, and unlike the first one, this one will test his powers. As Sasuke thought of his current strength, his mind returned to what Kakashi-sensei said. That day, Sasuke had spent the whole day thinking about Kakashi's words. Every time his mind told him that his sensei was perhaps right, but every time he saw the house empty, Sasuke blocked that thought from his head. He needed to focus on the Chunin exams. Sakura, on the other hand, didn't feel ready. Her mind was trying to tell her that she was ready, but every time she looked at Sasuke, Naruto, the girls from Taki and a few other genins, she couldn't help but compare them to herself and couldn't help but feel worthless. What good can she even do in this situation? Here she was walking towards danger, blindfolded without any information who the enemy could be or how can she even counter the enemy. What am I even adding to the team? Both Sasuke and Naruto are capable, and I'm nothing but just here, standing. After all the genins had signed their forms, Anko started again. "Alright, listen carefully, everyone. I'll explain what you'll be doing in this test. This will test everyone's survival skills. Each team will be assigned a different entrance gate to enter the forest. In the center of the forest, there's a locked tower located 10 kilometers from each gate. It will be a race to reach the tower. But to enter the tower, your team needs to have both these heaven and earth scrolls." She showed them the scrolls in his hand. "Half of you will receive the heaven scrolls, and the rest will receive the earth scrolls. So you have to fight to get both the scrolls. That means half of us will fail this test," Shikamaru mentioned. "I said it will be a race. We can't allow a large number of squads to pass this test for the next round. And if any of you poor genins die, your whole team will fail along with you, not that will be your concern once you become food," Anko mentioned, shocking the genins. "What?" were the cries of many genins present there. "You can't do that. That's totally unfair. Rules are rules. One more thing, the test has a time limit. You will get 5 days to finish this test, and the most important thing you should know is that you must not open the scroll before reaching the tower. If you open it, then your team will be disqualified immediately from the exams," Anko Proctor informed the genins. "What? What will we do about food?" Choji cried out with anime tears on his face. "There's plenty of animals and plants in the wilderness, of course. Try to eat any poisonous plant like Mimoku, eat that, and you can say goodbye to your eyes, and of course try to hunt animals, but you can always end up their food," Anko said, grinning from the pale looks of many genins around, except a few teams that didn't look intimidated. "Alright, please take your form over there." She pointed behind her. "And exchange it for the scroll, and after that, each team will be assigned a gate to be let inside." After finishing the process and getting a debrief, all the genin teams stood at their assigned gates and waited for the signal to enter the forest. Naruto was also behind the gates with his teammates. He was deep in his thoughts. This test was very tricky and had a very high chance of failure. This exam was crucial for him, not only because it was the Chunin selection exam. It was essential for him, too, because he wanted to test out his limits, and there was no other platform better than this. He wanted to dominate these exams. So, how are we going to do this? Sakura spoke, clearly seeing that Naruto was thinking. Naruto grabbed their earth scroll. He puffed a scroll from his wrist seal and opened it. He put the earth scroll nearby and started writing a seal. Sakura looked curiously at what he was doing. Sasuke minded his own business. What are you doing, Naruto? Sakura asked curiously, seeing the word written in Naruto's scroll. He then drew a circle around. He kept on drawing weird symbols and lines she couldn't understand, but then he saw him write another word close to the other one. She noticed he wrote almost the same lines and symbols around the other word, but she wondered what he was doing. Naruto took the earth scroll. He wrote the word on the scroll, but the next thing she knew, the ink in the earth scroll disappeared, almost as if it was never there, to begin with. Very well, now we are ready, and I will be the one keeping the scroll. Got it? Naruto ordered with a much different tone. His usual carefree and kind tone changed to a commanding one. His eyes looked colder, almost ice. Both Sakura and Sasuke nodded their heads in agreement. Team 10. 5 days without food. Choji mumbled in fright as he opened a bag and started checking how much food he had. Will you shut up already? Ino hissed. Is food all you can really think about? Choji, you don't have to be worried about the food. Because there will be plenty of animals and plants that we can eat in the forest, we will not starve. Shikamaru noted. Pitch. The Akimichi frowned. I know. So stop moping and help us think about how we are getting another scroll. Ino stated. It would be wise of us to lay a trap. I believe I can set up one in the forest, but I will need your help. Shikamaru said. If you say so. Ino replied. Thankfully Shikamaru knew how to make perfect plans. Choji kept looking as he counted how many bags of chips, homemade cakes, and not mentioning sandwiches with meat he had. Ino looked baffled at the amount of food Choji had on his bag, while Shikamaru was scratching his head and thinking if his friend was trying to lose weight, since it seemed he hadn't brought as much as he used to. Team 8. Alright, guys, let me lead. This is my speciality. Kiba informed his teammates. Akamaru barked in agreement. I'm fine with that. You use your nose and lead us to another team. My insects will find anyone nearby, then we ambush them and take their scroll. Shino said. It's a simple plan, but it should work, right? Hinata agreed. She saw the logic and agreed with it. She also knew that Kiba was not weak. After the mission in Leda Town, we can handle anything. This exam will be cake. The Inuzuka proclaimed confidently with a grin. Hinata, you active your Byakugan the moment the doors open. We need your vision, Kiba said. Hi, Hinata agreed. I think we should also think about the teams we should try to avoid. Why, you ask? Well, the teams from Kyumo, the team from IWA, and especially Naruto's team are not to be underestimated, Shino stated. Hinata nodded in agreement immediately, and she didn't want to fight Naruto. None of them is as strong as us, and I'm actually praying that we encounter Naruto, Kiba exclaimed with a big smile on his face. Akamaru shook his head in disapproval. Team 9. I will hold the scroll, Yuli will stay close to me, Tenten stay a bit further away for a surprise attack, Niji organized, looking at his teammates. Neither Lee nor Tenten held any objections. Niji, what should we do if we encounter any Konoha team? Lee asked, hoping they would avoid any encounter with any Konoha team. He would instead get the second scroll from a team from a foreign country. We take it, of course, even if it isn't the one we need. Fewer teams, the better, Niji stated. Lee didn't like the idea but didn't say anything, but then he remembered something. What about the 2 Kyumo teams? Lee asked with a hint of dread. At the mention of the Kyumo team, Niji's eyes looked covered in shadows. If we encounter them, I will make them curse the day their leader. Niji stopped making his point clear where he stood with the problem of the Kyumo team. Tenten said nothing, but she didn't want to do this. Revenge wouldn't help, and not to mention, the Genins held no responsibility for what their leader did. Suna team. Stay out of my way. I'll handle this exam. Gaara ordered his teammates. Alright. Of course, Gaara. Kankuro replied nervously. Just the thought of spending so much time alone with the likes of him frightened him. He could only hope that the other teams would take the end of his rage. Temari said nothing. She only sighed in annoyance and boredom. There was no reason for her to do anything. Gaara could take on every genin in this forest. This was too easy and boring for her. She knew the risk that the redhead genin possessed, but Gaara was much stronger than him. Team Kyumo. Very well, I'm in the front, Omoi, you stand behind me, same for you Karui, if we encounter any enemies, you can deal with the other two, I will deal with whoever is the strongest, Yujito said at his friends. Omio just shrugged his shoulder while Karui looked deep in thought. Yujito, what should we do if we encounter the Taki team or the Redheads team? Karui asked since both teams had their own Jinchuriki and, therefore, not to be underestimated. Yujito licked her lips slightly at the mention of Naruto. Don't worry about Naruto-kun. We will get along just fine. IWA team. Ikano, you stay behind me, Lulja, you will stay at my left, triangle 3A position, Ikano leave the bond activated during the whole exam, if we encounter any enemy, I will use my Yasi, if they have what we need, we take it. If not, we will be in our merry way, Ikamana explained. Roger that firecracker, Lulja said with a carefree tone and with a mocking gesture of her hand. A tick appeared in Ikamana's eyebrow at being called that. Ikano, do you see anyone interesting? She asked, turning to look at her brother, who looked deep in thought. Suna Jinchuriki, I would like to test something, Ikano stated with a clear indication of his tone. Lulja rolled her eyes at his tone but just decided to tag along with whatever he was trying to do. Sound team. Karen was as silent as the grave, her teammates were explaining what they should do, but the young Uzumaki was barely paying them any attention. She couldn't help but wonder if there was any way to talk with either Naruto or the other Uzumaki that she still didn't know the name. Ka-chan, where is our clan? Do you think we will ever find them? Young Karen asked with tears in her eyes, after so many years of her mother telling her that their clan was out there, their true home. Why have they abandoned us? Karen screamed, crying at seeing her mother in bed with bite marks around her arms. She felt a hand on her cheek. She opened her eyes to see the violet eyes of her mother looking at her with love. An Uzumaki never abandons their family, sweetheart, never, she spoke weakly. On the top of her head, her red hair had started slowly turning white, losing its pigment. Her mother put her fingertips where her heart was. The will of life is alive within you. Karen felt her eyes watering from the memories. If only you could be here, Ka-chan, the Uzumaki clan is not dead. Karen thought and remembered her mother sometimes talking about how Yuzushiogakure looked before they took it away from them. She escaped her thoughts, and a slap hit her straight in the face. She turned her eyes to look at her teammate, looking at her with a smirk. She tried to slap the Uzumaki again when Karen grabbed her hand, tightly. The girl whose name Karen didn't remember tried to move it away when her grip tightened, causing her to scream in pain. Her chakra chains tightened around her whole arm, the red mark on her cheek from the slap healed immediately, but the girl felt weaker and weaker. Next time you slap me, you will go to Sector 0, Karen threatened with cold blood eyes. The girl paled even more and looked even more frightened. Karen let go of her hand, and the girl fell in the grass, almost motionless now. Her chest rising up and down was the only sign that her soul was still there. I will keep the heaven scroll, Karen stated. Later. The second round of the exams, start now, Anko shouted. All the gates opened, and they got a green signal to enter the forest. Wasting no time, Naruto and his teammates flew into the woods at high speed. Naruto crossed his fingers, shadow clone jutsu over 100 clones spread far and wide across the forest. Be ready for everything? Naruto said, having a feeling of dread on his stomach. Team 8. A Konoha team was rushing through the trees when one of them tripped over a wire. Before they could process what was happening, a big chain wire fell over them, the ropes around the edges of the trees nearby tightened around them, multiple lice fell from the trees around their bodies as they started drinking their blood. You should have been careful, insects can be quite frightening. Their scream of agony was heard throughout the whole forest. At the gates, Anko smirked from the screams, only 3 minutes, that's a new record, Anko said, smiling. Team 9. They kept jumping from tree to tree when several shurikens flew towards them. Niji and Lee jumped away to an open area, trees all around them. He activated his Byakugan, much to his disappointment, it was a tiny village. How about you give us your scroll? The one who Niji thought was the leader spoke. The Hyuga instead smirked, knowing they had the scroll they needed. Lee, they have it, Niji said. Lee nodded his head and jumped towards the third guy, his speed caught him off guard, a good kick in the chin broke his jaw, His body was sent flying crashing against a tree. He screamed in agony, his mouth full of blood, desperately trying to speak. AKA the girl screamed when Niji showed up behind her. "You should never let your guard down," he stated. 2 palms. 4 palms. 8 palms. 16 palms. Before he could finish, the leader tried to slice him when an arrow pierced his leg, followed by 2 more around his left arm and right arm. Niji saw Tenten winked at him. He turned his eyes to the girl but saw her on the ground, crawling away. Niji checked the bags and found the scroll, and they left immediately. "We have both scrolls. What now, Niji?" Tenten asked. "Let's find another team, a Kumo team," Niji stated. "Karen." She kept jumping from tree to tree, her team behind her. When her senses screamed at her, she immediately jumped to her right, avoiding a paper bomb. Her eyes saw an ANBU rushing towards her. His sword swung down, meeting gold chakra chain sword. Karen fell to the ground. Her eyes saw both of her teammates in the ground bleeding from several places. 2 other ANBU soon joined the ANBU, and she immediately recognized the word root written on their forehead. Karen was trying to come up with a way to get her teammates away and deal with them, when the one ANBU behind them suddenly grabbed 2 long needles and pierced their neck. Karen saw in surprise as the 2 ANBU fell to the ground, but they were still alive, somehow. Karen couldn't see anything to identify the 1 ANBU left. "Who are you?" Karen asked, still holding her chain sword tightly. The ANBU glanced at her, and she noticed no eye holes in his mask. He said nothing but put his hands in the chest of the ANBU in the ground. Karen gasped when he slowly started getting invisible and disappeared without leaving a single trail behind. Who was he? Naruto. The young Uzumaki could feel the 2 of them getting closer and closer. "Sasuke, Sakura, be ready," Naruto shouted at them. Before they could respond, a massive wave of wind flew towards them, only to be met with an enormous wall of stone. Sasuke looked behind to see Naruto with his hands on the ground when suddenly a man with white hair rushed at Naruto, swinging at him. The redhead blocked the bone just in time with his sword. "You fight with me," the man said as he attacked again. Naruto blocked his attack again and tried to kick his chest when he suddenly saw multiple bones sticking out of his chest. He stopped himself before he wounded his own leg, but the man attacked again at his heart. Naruto moved his left hand, the bone pierced his palm. Naruto grabbed the bone with his left palm and kicked the man in the head, throwing him to a tree. Naruto jumped away, pulling out the bone. He felt that Sasuke and Sakura were far away from him. Close to them was the shinobi with a large level of chakra. Kurama healed his palm within a minute, and Naruto looked at the man with narrowed eyes. "Before we can begin, can I at least know the name of my attacker?" Naruto asked, taking the 1 drop of water sword position. The man threw his hat away, revealing a white-haired man wearing a thin white shirt, bones sticking out of his chest. His right hand moved towards his left shoulder, a bone slowly came out of his shoulder, his skin split open but no blood, as he took on his bone and aimed it towards him. "Of course, my apologies. My name is Kimimaro Kaguya." Chapter 56, Kaguya Clan. Naruto. Naruto and Kimimaro stood facing off. The 2 stood still while the wind blew across the field. Kimimaro pulled the bones out of both of his arms to dual-wield swords. "Let us begin." A short quirk of Naruto's lips was all the indication to start that either needed as they moved as blurs across the battlefield. Naruto was dodging Kimimaro's double-handed strikes and attempting to counter with his fists. Naruto ducked a dual slash at his head but ended up getting kicked back by Kimimaro. Naruto ducked down low and rushed at Kimimaro's legs, shooting for his knees with a takedown attempt, sweeps, and swiping at his legs and lower torso with his fists while simultaneously avoiding low stabbing attempts from Kimimaro. Kimimaro was the best all-around close-range fighter in pretty much all of Otogekure, and a good fighter can tell things about their opponent's style from watching them attack. Kimimaro saw what Naruto gave up in poise and precise movements due to the influx of power he gained in terms of his bloodlust and ways to cause injury to his enemies. If Kimimaro didn't show up to his own power himself, then the attack would have begun to overwhelm him. Kimimaro saw an opening and rushed to stab his chest. His bone pierced his chest but no blood. When he felt his senses go crazy, he tried to jump when it punched him square in the face, sending him crashing into a nearby tree. Naruto pulled out his sword. Kimimaro stood up again when he felt the bones around his face crack. His eyes widened at the sheer strength of the Uzumaki. Orochimaru-sama warned him not to underestimate him. The bone user started slowly changing appearance. His cursed seal on his chest started spreading around his body, but before he could complete, the redhead stood up in front of him, with a swing of his sword. Thanks to his cursed mark, he docked just in time. the trees behind him fell like matches. Naruto was about to attack again when Kimimaro suddenly coughed blood. This confused the redhead since he knew he hadn't hurt any of his eternal organs, or maybe he's sick. Naruto swung at Kimimaro before the two vanished and began clashing once again. The sound of bone clashing with steel echoed around the area as they crossed blades with one another again. Naruto's attacks once again became a fluid match for Kimimaro's sleek movements as the two dealt an equal amount of grazing wounds to one another as they met in a stalemate in Kenjutsu. Kimimaro swung at his torso only for Naruto to grab it with his palm, pulling the bone and him towards him. Naruto added chakra to his fist, hitting him right in the chest again, sending him flying and crashing against a rock. The strength caused the rock to crumble like sand. Naruto winced in pain. Looking at his right palm, he saw 3 holes around his palm and slashes around his fingers and wrist, his blood dripping from his hand to the ground. Naruto's eyes went to his opponent, who was walking towards him with a vast bone spear on his right palm. The part around his cheek had grown bones with pointy ends, just how it was when he had tried to kick his chest. The redhead narrowed his head. He needed to change the game, his teammates needed him, and he couldn't stay here and waste time with Kimimaro. Naruto's hand started healing. He put his sword in front of him. With his left hand, he unlocked his weights. Kimimaro's cursed mark spread all over his body. Do you see? Kimimaro dropped the swords in his hands as he began to transform again, Orochimaru-sama and his ambition. That is why I fight for his goals and dream. I am his weapon, and I will allow myself to be broken if it will prevent someone like you from stopping him. Kimimaro's skin turned brown, and 6 large bone spikes protruded from the sides of his back. A spiky tail emerged from his back, and upon seeing that, Naruto narrowed his eyes, leaking his Ki at 50%. Is that what you accepted? You let yourself become a monster just to serve someone like Orochimaru? Naruto spoke his name with venom. Kimimaro stood back up and looked at Naruto with a superior gaze. This is Orochimaru-sama's gift to me. And with it, I will repay him for all he has done by defeating the ones that stand in the way of him and his grand plans. Kimimaro pulled out his spinal column to form a flexible, spiky chain staff. This is the Tesenka no Mai, Tsuru, dance of the clematis, vine. You are quite skilled to push me this far, but you will not win. Orochimaru-sama has plans for Sasuke Uchiha. It is most unfortunate for you that you will not live to see them come to fruition. Well, to make that happen, you're going to have to come over here and fight me unless you think you can kill me by talking me to death. Kimimaro snapped his new weapon in a test of sorts. For the future of Otogekure and Orochimaru-sama, you will die today. Naruto set his sword in a ready stance and gazed out at Kimimaro coldly. For someone that seems to have a fetish for saying that they're going to kill me, you sure do a lot of talking. As they rushed at each other again, the redhead immediately noticed the added speed. He had to give it credit. Kimimaro was much stronger like this. As they two clashed, Naruto added wind chakra to his sword, causing to cut the bone slightly much to Kimimaro's shock. They kept fighting, strikes after strikes. The bone user used his bone to wrap Naruto's right arm, sending him towards him with high speed. Naruto's eyes widened as Kimimaro's left hand was engulfed in a colossal bone covering his whole left arm. Die! Kimimaro screamed, piercing Naruto's chest, but only for the real Naruto to show behind him. Kimimaro was sent flying, but the bone user stopped himself and turned towards the redhead. Impossible, that was the real one. Did he change position? No, he must have moved extremely fast and created a clone, but when? Before Kimimaro could think further, Naruto rushed at him with his sword. Kimimaro started dodging one after the other. Not to his knowledge, Naruto's left hand kept touching the trees around. He kept dodging, as they returned to the ground. Naruto swung again only for the bone user to use his big spear around his left arm to deflect the sword. Kimimaro moved fast, but to his surprise, the redhead smirked. Suddenly several red chains were tightened around his left and right arm. He tried to break them, but in vain. When his eyes widened to see several red seals drawn around the trees, and the chains were coming out of them. Did you think I was throwing you against trees for fun? Naruto said as Kimimaro remembered the redhead touching the trees with his left hand on multiple occasions. Naruto was in front of him. His right fist was engulfed in red chakra. Kimimaro immediately grew bones around his chest and face, but this time, the red chakra destroyed the bones and hit his chest, causing him to crack and break, sending him flying through multiple trees. The trees fell from the strength, dirt and debris covered the ground. Naruto could still feel his chakra, but before he could do anything, the bone user stood up and used a hand sign. Kimimaro started sinking in the ground like water. His whole chest was destroyed, and blood spilt out of his mouth. Orochimaru-sama should have completed his mission by now, he whispered. Naruto didn't stop to rest but immediately went after his teammates, ignoring the pain in his right hand. Hokage office. Then Ibiki came in and told him about an accusation that was made by one of the Chunin hopefuls. Apparently, there was a leak within his office. A genin was able to gain information that he was not supposed to have. He checked the name Yakushi Kabuto and did find it suspicious that he had participated in 7 exams and permanently forfeited after the 2nd exam. Sure, he could have gotten the information after all those exams, but that couldn't be. He launched an investigation into the boy and hoped that he wasn't a spy. He released a sigh and leaned back in his chair. He wondered what else could happen today. He heard a knock on his door and permitted them to enter. He cursed mentally as he saw his rival enter his office. He could only wonder what Danzo wanted now. "Hello, old friend. What can I do for you today?" Hiruzen asked. "I heard that Orochimaru might be within the village," Danzo said. "Geez, I wonder how you could have figured that out." "Nothing is confirmed, but I have been informed of that boy participating in the exams," Hiruzen said. "Are you sure that it is wise to allow him to continue? His objective includes our weapon, which is also in the exams." Danzo said. "Naruto can handle himself. I also trust his team to watch his back as we did during the wars." Hiruzen said. "You are not handling this seriously, Hiruzen. I also thought it was idiotic that we allow other villages into ours, but you are risking the life of our weapon and placing your trust in Kakashi." Danzo said. "I have warned you before, Danzo. He is not a weapon, and you will never refer to him as such in my presence again. Also, I trust Kakashi much more than you do. He has raised this team to be one of my best. I dare say that they can even surpass my team without falling to the events that led to 2 of them leaving. I cannot touch Ikano because he is protected by the guidelines that make up the exams. Until they are over, I can do little." Hiruzen said. "I still see that you are too soft, Hiruzen," Danzo said. "And yet, I was chosen and not you. Do you wish to know why?" Hiruzen asked. He watched as Danzo's lone eye narrowed. He just turned and left the office without another word. He walked out of the tower and made his way to his home. Once home, he tapped his cane, and a shinobi appeared. "Danzo-sama." The shinobi said and bowed. "I want you to send a team into the Forest of Death and bring a boy named Ikano here. Capture his team as well, including the Jonin sensei." Danzo ordered. The shinobi bowed and vanished. If Hiruzen weren't going to do anything, then he would, as it was to protect the great tree that is Konoha. Soon a team. In a standoff, 2 teams, one from the village hidden in the sand and another from the village hidden in the rain. Both teams waited in a wooded clearing, waiting to make their move. The rain ninja was cocky, sneering and taunting the sand genin. They were dressed more for a summer shower than a trek through a forest waiting to kill them. Each team member wore a slick blue and white jumpsuit, a sizable domed hat, and several umbrellas strapped to their back. "Do you believe the nerve of these sand ninja, Shirbure?" The middleman, Midar, drawled, "challenging us head-on like this. Yeah, they're a bunch of fools," his shorter companion, Bayu, crowed. The sand ninja said nothing, made no move other than to observe the rain ninja coldly. One of them, Shigeru, stepped forward. 2 vertical scars ran along the right side of his face, bisecting his eyes and, at the same time, rendering it useless. His left eye glittered brightly, shining with enough cruelty for both. He had the look of a predator about him. Or someone who very much wanted to look like a predator. The remaining eye glared at each sand ninja in turn. "Too bad, kids, you should have picked your opponents better. Now you're all going to die." Finally, Gaara of the Sand spoke. In a soft, rasping voice filled with rage and pain and venom. "I've heard enough out of you. Let's make this quick. I don't want to waste my time." Gaara was at least 2 feet shorter than the rain ninja, but something just wasn't right about the boy. A great overwhelming darkness seemed to flow off him in waves. He was dressed all in black, save for the white sash across his chest and the large gourd tied to his back. Wild, red hair framed his features. His eyes, lined with the dark rings of sleep deprivation, burned with hungry malice. Kankuro winced. "Hey Gaara," he cautiously began, "wouldn't it make more sense to follow these punks and gather information first? I mean, if they have the same type of scroll as we do, then we're just fighting an unnecessary battle." Shigeru's face darkened. He didn't like these pucks treating him like he was nothing right to his face. They were blatantly disrespecting him and his squad. Slowly his hands reached for the 7 umbrellas at his back. Gaara didn't even turn around. "I don't care. They looked at me the wrong way, and now they have to die," he said softly. It was then that Shibare snapped. "If you think you can kill us, then try it." He snarled. Shigure's hands found the umbrella handles at his back, tore them free with a vicious snap, and threw them high into the air. All eyes turned to the sky. They floated some 20 feet above the sand ninjas' heads, poised like dandelion seeds. Then they stopped, held aloft by the power of Shigure's chakra. He manipulated his hands in the proper signs as massive chakra began to pour into the umbrellas. The umbrellas began to spin, and hundreds of needles started to fill the sky. And now, ninja art, Senbon rainstorm. He cried. Every needle flew straight and true toward one target, Gaara of the Sand. They circled him from all sides. One move in any direction would fill him with hundreds of tiny points of death. Needles buzzed through the air like flies, awaiting the command of their mazer and creating a rainstorm of death around Gaara that cut him off from his companions, who could only watch on. Shigure marveled for a moment at how the boys' squad could watch on smugly while their leader was about to be torn apart. Up, down, left, right. There's no blind spot for this jutsu, and it's deadly accurate. Shigure waves his hand casually, causing a few needles to pierce the ground at Gaara's feet. The boy never flinched, he almost looked hopeful. A vein throbbed in the rain ninja's head. This had gone on for far too long. He waved his hands, and hundreds of needles came crashing back down to the earth with enough force to crack the ground beneath Gaara and kick up a large cloud of dust. Gaara never moved. His fate was lost amongst the dust. Shigure laughed, looking triumphant. He took an eager step forward to survey the damage and to collect the scroll needed to enter the tower. The dust settled, and Shigure froze in mid-step. Gaara of the Sand stood unharmed, not a single mark upon his skin. Every needle had embedded itself within the cocoon-like wall of sand. Tiny motes of sand silently flitted around, almost mockingly. A small space near the front remained open, revealing Gaara's eyes, glittering malevolently. "Is that the best you can do?" he asked darkly. Shigure was horrified. "It can't be, not one wound." "That's impossible." He clapped his hands together, going for the sand ninja's exposed throat. Without any signal from Gaara, the sand moves to intercept every needle. Not one touched him. Gaara's expression darkened another notch. "A Senbon rainstorm, huh? I have an idea. Let's make it rain blood instead." The rain ninja froze. Never, in the history of his village, had the Senbon failed to neutralize a target. For this boy to have avoided every needle, he just wasn't human. Shigure's teammates took a step back. He shot them a disgusted look even though he was just as terrified as they were. "How?" he snarled. Kankuro stepped forward. "It's a defense that nothing can penetrate. Gaara carries that sand in the gourd on his back, and when he's attacked, he uses the power of his chakra to harden the sand so that it's stronger than steel. It's a jutsu that only Gaara can do. Somehow it happens reflexively, independent of his will. So any attacks against him are doomed to failure." The wall of sand began to dissolve, melting back into the ground and leaving no trace of its presence behind. Except for all the needles it had collected and deposited in the dirt around Gaara and a few tiny motes of sand in the air. "Oh yeah. Well, we'll see." Shigure charged across the clearing toward the sand ninja, pulling 2 kunai fighting knives from his belt. Kankuro gave the rain ninja one last, almost pitying look. "Face it. You guys can't hope to defeat Gaara." Gaara grimaced, the closest expression he had to a smile. Slowly he clasped his hands together, making each sign precisely and pumping his chakra into the dirt beneath Shigure's feet. "Sand coffin!" Gaara cried. In mid-step, the ground reached out to devour him. From head to toe, he was covered in a cocoon of sand. Not like Gaara's, which was meant to protect, this cocoon was made to kill. Only a bare patch left his face visible, twisted by agony and fear, and even that was rapidly dwindling. In less than 5 seconds, the hunter became the hunted. Tiny motes of sand flew around his face, occasionally entering his eye. One by one, the umbrellas fell from the sky. Shigure's voice strained as the sand tightened its grip on him. What is this? Let me go." Gaara ignored him. "All I have to do is cover your big mouth, and you'll be dead." In response, the sands gathered around Shigure's nose and mouth but backed off after a moment. But that would be too easy and too boring. Gaara picked up one of the fallen umbrellas and unlocked it, holding it over his head as if it were about to rain. Shigure tried, without luck, to blink away the sand from his eyes. Gaara raised his free hand, and the sands holding Shigure rose high into the air. The rain ninja struggled valiantly, but he couldn't break free. Gaara looked up at him one final time. He showed no emotion, save for a gnawing hunger tempered by malice. Gaara clenched his fist. Sand burial! He cried. With one last, tormented scream, Shigure left this world. It was crushed into oblivion by the relentless sand. Blood rained from the sky, splattering the umbrella and the rain ninja's horrified comrades. Gaara turned to them. There wasn't any pain. I crushed him with more force than was necessary, so it was over quickly. The scream you heard was from fear. He closed the dripping umbrella and surveyed the sodden landscape. The corpse's bitter crimson tears mingle with the endless sand and feed the chaos within me, making me stronger, he whispered. Midar stepped forward, each step an effort to master his fear, to lay the scroll upon the ground. Just take the scroll. Go on, here. Bayu spoke in a high-pitched voice. Yes. Take it. Please spare us. Gaara tossed the umbrella away and reached out to the remaining rain ninja. Once more, the earth reached up to hungrily consume the rest of the squad. They screamed frantically as the sand engulfed them as it did their leader, their sanity shattering along with their bodies. Blood rained from the skies. Kankuro walked forward to retrieve the scroll. Hey, we got lucky, he smiled. It's a heaven scroll. Just shut up, Gaara hissed. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. He walked toward the tower. Heaven helps anything that got in his way. Suddenly all three of them heard clapping. They turned to see three genins standing there. The one guy in the front clapping as if it was a celebration or some kind. At first, Kankuro wanted to call them in their stupidity to come out after that, but the one in the front sent all three the same vibes Gaara usually sent. Excellent Gaara of the Sand, the IWA shinobi said as his right eye slowly darkened and turned pitch black. No white areas, much to the shock of Suna shinobi. Now, how about we see who can go deeper into the abyss? Sasuke. When the man started attacking and drew Naruto away, Sasuke turned where the gust of wind came from and saw a woman. The woman was chuckling. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. What the hell do you want? I know you have an earth scroll. Luckily for you, or me, I have a heaven scroll. The woman said with glee in her voice and face. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Just from looking at this woman, he could tell that she was trouble. So, you didn't answer my question. What the hell do you want? Sasuke asked, clenching his teeth and feeling sweat rolling down his cheek. I want your earth scroll. Also, I've never fought an Uchiha before. I want to test myself against the might of the Sharingan. If it's a fight you want, you've found it. Sasuke scoffed and immediately activated his Sharingan. I know, and to raise the stakes. The woman then tilted her head back. She held the scroll above her open mouth. Sasuke thought, why do I feel like I won't like what will happen next? The woman pushed the scroll down her throat, swallowing it. Now, this is more than about some scroll. The only way out of here is if one of us dies. This lady is sick. What the hell did she do that for? Sasuke couldn't help but feel afraid. His body started shaking like a leaf. Sakura by his side didn't look much better. Are you scared of death, Sasuke? I doubt that in your life, you've even experienced death. Let me show you. The monster said maniacally, her tongue coming out, long enough to reach her neck. For a split second, the monster's eyes turned dark yellow. Sasuke and Sakura felt completely frozen as two kunai flew and pierced their heads. Both Sakura and Sasuke fell to the ground dead, blood spilt all over them. Aowa, Sakura screamed in terror after what she saw, her eyes crying tears, as her hands grabbed her own head, as if trying to cover her ears. The color on her face disappeared. Sasuke wasn't in a much better situation, feeling trapped, feeling terror, his heart beating on his throat, his face turned pale, his breathing quickened. What was that? Before he could think of anything, the monster pulled out two kunai and held them in her right hand. Let's see how special you are. The kunai flew towards them. Sasuke saw the vision happening all over again. With little strength left, he stabbed his leg, grabbing Sakura quickly and jumping away. Sasuke ran as fast as possible, his legs running on themselves, his eyes desperately trying to find a way out, but the trees were everywhere, trapping him inside. His eyes found a place high in a tree. Jumping there, he put Sakura, who was still shaking in the branch. Sa-sa-sa-dash. Sakura tried to talk when they both heard the sound of something moving. Sasuke turned in time to see a giant snake coming towards them, his eyes yellow, Sasuke could only see the monster. Disappear! Sasuke cried out in terror, throwing several shurikens at the open mouth of the snake. He cried out in pain, but Sasuke felt his body stiffen, his blood turned to ice, his eyes widened, feeling like his skin was splitting apart. At the top of the snake's head, the skin cracked, the monster slowly rising up from the snake, her tongue out smirking evilly at them. Sakura could only watch in horror, her arms hugging her legs. Do you want your friends to die for you? Sakura's head suddenly raised, the voice of her sensei in her head. I. Sakura tried to say, but no words were coming out. One day you will fall, and when that day comes, either you will die or a friend of yours. No. Sakura put her hands around the tree, helping her to stand up slowly. Her eyes saw the monster looking at Sasuke. Her hands were shaking, slowly reaching for the kunai in her pouch. No. Sasuke saw the monster smirking, he jumped towards him, the Uchiha desperately tried to move, his whole body frozen in fear, he closed his eyes waiting for everything to end. Sasuke felt nothing but the sound of a fist hitting someone. Opening his eyes, he saw Sakura standing in front of him, her kunai falling, the monster's fist in her throat. Sakura! The monster grabbed her throat and, with his right hand, punched her in the face. Her body flew away, hitting a rock and rolling around the ground, finally stopping. Sakura screamed in agony, her right leg broken, the position of her leg was opposite, her left leg had bones piercing her skin and coming out, blood coming out of her mouth, ears, and nose, her nose broken. Sasuke didn't have time to think as another snake rushed towards Sakura with an open mouth. Moving his sword with a fast swing, the snake's head was sliced in half, his head fell to the ground. Naruto's eyes focused on the new enemy. The redhead didn't need an introduction to know the rogue Sannin in front of him, his grin from ear to ear, his pale skin, and snake-like eyes. Looking at the Uzumaki in front of him, Orochimaru licked his lips with his long tongue, his eyes filled with glee, his eyes looking at his new prey in front of him. His eyes glanced at the little Uchiha behind the Uzumaki, still breathing heavily, his hand on his chest, still desperately trying to catch his breath. Sasuke, take Sakura and leave, Naruto ordered, not taking his eyes off the snake. It took a few seconds for Sasuke to register Naruto's words. If it were any other situation, Sasuke would insist on fighting, but the ki of this enemy was enough to make him see his own death and wasn't even a genjutsu. Last time Sasuke remembered being so scared, feeling like in a cage, no way out, was when Itachi had activated his Mangekyo and made him see his family being killed by him. Turning his head, Sasuke grabbed Sakura, who was unconscious, carrying her, he jumped away, leaving Naruto behind, who raised his right hand and unlocked his shoulder seal. My godmother told me you were a snake, but I never thought that she meant literally, Naruto stated, his body engulfed in blue chakra. Orochimaru's eyes widened and filled with even more malice and glee. Let's see if your clan is as strong as remembered. Naruto abridged one shot, just for fun, not related to the story. Sasuke looked at Itachi with terrified eyes, he had killed the whole clan and their parents. Why did you do this, Itachi? Sasuke asked, barely holding his tears. They were using our Wi-Fi, Sasuke, Itachi answered with no remorse and a smile on his face. That's not so bad. They found your secret photos, Sasuke, Itachi said with remorse. Sasuke's eyes almost popped out from fear. No, anything but that. No, you promised they were secured, Sasuke cried. I'm sorry, Sasuke, I'm afraid they found your real name is Sasuke, Itachi said. No, Sasuke cried as Itachi activated his eye of infinitive bullshit. Allow me to show you, mindfuck. No. Chapter 57, A Fox vs. a Snake. I'm not here for your games, Orochimaru, Naruto growled. Without looking, he brought his forearm up to block the thrusting strike of the sword of Kusanagi as it protruded from the mouth of a snake that had appeared out of the trunk of the tree Naruto was standing on. I insist, Orochimaru said sinisterly. He leapt forward, snakes blossoming from his sleeves. Naruto deflected several more sword strikes as he nimbly leapt back. As he landed, he inhaled deeply and released an intense stream of flame into the onrush of snakes to incinerate them completely. Orochimaru burst through the flame unharmed and attempted to land a series of blows utilizing his most complex hand-to-hand combat styles. To his surprise, Naruto managed to match his moves in a way that only another master of the technique should be able to do. That knowledge, however, enabled him to dodge in time as Naruto twisted unnaturally and attempted to bury a kunai in his side. I see my old comrade has trained you quite well, Orochimaru said. Yeah, he talked about you, He told me that if I ever see you to leave you a message, Naruto said. To his surprise, Orochimaru stopped fighting and looked interested. Next time we met, I won't hold back like last time, Naruto said with a dangerous tone that somehow reminded Orochimaru of his old teammate. He, of course, knew his teammate hadn't used Sage Mode last time they fought, despite the snake wanting him to use it out of curiosity. Naruto narrowed his eyes, and he remembered many times that his Tojiji mentioned Orochimaru. He had said it many times that he blamed himself that Orochimaru was out there hurting people. I could have done something, despite trying to lie to myself. I failed, Naruto. If I had used Sage Chakra, I would have defeated Orochimaru, but I didn't. In the end, I couldn't get myself to kill my friend. Naruto knew his godfather blamed himself for all the bad things Orochimaru had done throughout the years. No more. Cut the crap, Orochimaru, and I am in no mood for chit-chat. Are you here to fight me or not? Naruto retorted. Well, I think it's time for us to get started, so don't hold back, Orochimaru said evilly, licking his lips. Naruto did not respond, as he knew that Orochimaru would not accept anything less from him. Orochimaru looked at him and then suddenly drew his katana. Orochimaru then took up his own fighting stance, showing off his own smirk as if this was just a game to him. Orochimaru then showed him how much he learned from his former teammates. With pleasure, Naruto charged at Orochimaru, who then raced towards him. Orochimaru crossed the distance between them in just a few seconds. Naruto's katana clashed with Orochimaru's sword, the redhead swung to his head, but the snake lowered his head just in time to make his own strike. Naruto jumped away immediately, knowing that sword had one of the most dangerous poisonous in the world. For the first few minutes of their battle, Naruto tried to slash Orochimaru using his katana. Despite his attempts, Orochimaru would eventually stop him from using his swords. Is that all you can do, Uzumaki? Orochimaru mocked Naruto as he continued to avoid his attacks. Naruto then focused on changing his tactics as he cried out, Wind Slash. Orochimaru escaped from the wind's crescent shape by jumping out of the way. When he saw Naruto in front of him, his katana slashed open his belly. Orochimaru turned into mud, and he revealed that he had replaced himself. Orochimaru then showed up right behind Naruto, who was already on his guard. Naruto added chakra to his fist and tried to hit the snake's neck to crush his throat, but the Sannin grabbed his hand and couldn't help but winch slightly from the sheer strength behind his fist. Orochimaru punched him straight in the chin. The punch was followed by a powerful kick to the side, which sent the redhead to the ground. Naruto immediately recovered from his hit, taking out a kunai and throwing it towards a tree branch. Naruto landed on the branch and immediately threw several Senbon needles towards the snake Sannin. Orochimaru caught one of the Senbon needles that came at him. His nose immediately smelled it. The poison on it was one used to paralyze the victim. Orochimaru was amused by the fact that Naruto's godmother had trained him well. He noted that Naruto could still rival Kabuto's skill in terms of combat. Naruto's eyes turned red. As he rushed towards the Sannin, the snake opened his mouth. A snake with a sword pierced the Uzumaki in the stomach, only for it to disappear. No smoke behind. What was that? Orochimaru didn't have time to wonder when several red chakra chains chased behind him. Orochimaru made sure to keep his distance. The chains kept chasing behind when the redhead showed up in front of him with a Rasengan in his hand. Take this. The Rasengan hit him in the chest, sending him flying and smashing with the ground. Naruto landed on the ground knowing the snake was very much alive. Kukuku, Jiraiya has taught you well, Orochimaru started, walking out from the crater, his mouth opened, his jaw almost a meter wide open. Naruto's eyes widened seeing hands coming out of the mouth. Another Orochimaru came out grinning with no wounds, and the old one liquefied and turned to acid, melting the ground. I didn't know you could vomit yourself, Naruto said disgustedly. He knew snakes shade their skin, but seeing a human do that. Naruto attacked Orochimaru again, and he tried to hit him with his right arm. Orochimaru quickly caught Naruto's elbow. Orochimaru caught Naruto with a sharp strike to the chin. The latter immediately brought up his knee and hit him with a spinning back kick. Naruto stayed on his feet and quickly recovered. Orochimaru was surprised by the speed and strength of a kick, as he had been unable to block it. When he landed on the ground, his arm was still a bit numb from the kick, but he quickly shook it off and walked back to his feet. After Orochimaru engaged Naruto, the latter immediately followed him and stayed defensive for a few minutes. He was also curious about how well Naruto was using various parts of his body. Orochimaru just saw enough, so he decided to kick Naruto in the side. Naruto tried to punch Orochimaru with a left hook, but the latter easily avoided it. Orochimaru then tried to hit Naruto with his right fist, but the latter managed to duck under. Orochimaru avoided facing the Uzumaki by flipping over Naruto, but the redhead used his right leg to him in the face, sending him to a tree. "Is that all you can do?" Orochimaru taunted him with a smirk. When he got up, he saw a small sticky note on his foot. It was a weight seal, which Naruto must have placed on his foot. When Orochimaru saw the seal, Naruto immediately got back on his feet and charged at him as the snake was trying to free himself. Once he was back on his feet, Naruto raised his fists and slammed Orochimaru's head into his hand. At the same time, he channeled a large amount of chakra into his fists, adding even Kurama's chakra. Orochimaru could not avoid the punch, as his lower leg was stuck in a weight seal, which prevented him from running away. His body was sent flying, hitting a tree at the bottom. The tree fell to the ground from the force. Before Naruto could enjoy his victory any longer, he heard a familiar chuckle from the dust formed after Orochimaru's smash into the tree. "Do you think you're the only one who can enhance his skin?" Orochimaru smirked. Naruto understood that the snake Sannin had enhanced his skin to take minor damage. He then saw Orochimaru fixing his head back in place, and he was just as scared as he was seeing him. "Your strength is impressive, but you're not at the level of Jiraiya or Tsunade yet." Orochimaru avoided punching and kicking Naruto for a few minutes, as he knew that his opponent's strength was extraordinary. When they finally got to the clearing, it was filled with large craters and chunks of trees that had been smashed to bits. Naruto then decided to up the ante, performing a single-hand seal. When the former Sannin saw all the clones, he was not worried at all. Naruto and his clones made the game more attractive due to how skilled Orochimaru handled large numbers. After defeating several of the Naruto clones, Orochimaru turned into a wooden log. When the others hit him, he used this log to replace himself. Naruto then used his senses to find him. Once he found Orochimaru, Naruto ordered his clones to fire a volley of kunai at him. He quickly avoided the kunai, though, as he was able to avoid it by jumping away. The snake saw 3 large fireballs coming at him. The flames engulfed him, but Orochimaru immediately got over it, using his Sanaijushu to eject the snakes from his body. After destroying the clones, he landed back on the ground and attacked the enemies. Unknown to him, Naruto kept adding small red seals around the area. During this event, the Naruto clones fought Orochimaru in a battle that was more than just a hand-to-hand fight. Despite their immense size, the latter was still able to defeat the clones without much trouble. As the fighting continued, one of Naruto's clones made a hand gesture and then shouted, "Doton." At that moment, the ground around Orochimaru started to spiral inward. To prevent getting crushed under the earth, he jumped into the air and then disappeared. Orochimaru immediately dispatched the remaining Naruto clones after landing. However, upon destroying the last of the Naruto clones, he lost sight of the real Naruto. After realizing that Naruto was nowhere to be found, Orochimaru started walking around the trees, thinking that he might find a way to get closer to him. Orochimaru was trying to find Naruto-kun, but the latter was already there. Suddenly, a tree appeared out of nowhere, which wrapped around his body and prevented him from moving. After that, Naruto went to stab the snake Sannin, but before delivering the final blow, Orochimaru managed to break Naruto's genjutsu. After accidentally hitting a tree, Orochimaru jumped up and started looking for Naruto. While he was there, he saw that he was being wrapped up in vines. He remained calm as he knew that this was just another genjutsu. Orochimaru felt disappointed and ashamed that he was still using a genjutsu. He then used the genjutsu, Kai, to free himself. He then realized that Naruto used Magen, Nichikokonia Reizu no Jutsu, which was a distraction technique used to hide the binding vine genjutsu. With a lot of training, Naruto-kun was capable of using genjutsu. Orochimaru could not move his body correctly, and when he tried to move it, he found seals on the trees. He then realized that Naruto had put him under a genjutsu seal. Since Naruto had captured Orochimaru in genjutsu, he was prevented from moving. As Naruto was about to leave the area, he heard Orochimaru's dark throwing of something. He then appeared out of the ground, without so much as an injury to Naruto. After seeing Naruto draw his sword again, Orochimaru was amused by what he saw. He then charged at Naruto with his blade, but the slash was empty as he tried to avoid getting hit. Orochimaru then noticed that Naruto was using a technique known as the Erasunomi, which is a technique created by Uzumaki Kushina, the Red Death. The concept of this technique was to switch the user's katana from one hand to the other while slashing a target. This technique was very similar to the method of hitting a target with a regular slash. Orochimaru immediately fell to avoid the lethal slash that Naruto threw his way. However, even after avoiding the deadly blow, he still received a large wound on his shirt. As he tried to fight back, he was kicked in the chest by Naruto. Orochimaru quickly recovered from his attack, but he was distracted by Naruto's charging attack. When he saw the kid with his katana, he took immediate action. He then unleashed a roundhouse kick to send Naruto flying. After Orochimaru kicked him, Naruto quickly got back on his feet. He then saw the snakes attacking him using Sanaijushu. Naruto then started to gather the water and created a wall of water around him. Upon seeing the large wall of water in front of Naruto, Orochimaru was shocked to learn that there was no other water source nearby. He was then surprised to see that the water created the image of Naruto. When the real Naruto appeared, he swung his katana at him. When Naruto saw Orochimaru revert into the mud, he thought that he had replaced himself. The other Orochimaru then kicked him, which caused the redhead boy to drop his katana once more. Orochimaru then walked towards Naruto with a sadistic grin on his face. "You are full of surprises. I knew you Uzumaki were strong-headed and hard to kill, but this is just impressive," Orochimaru said, chuckling darkly. Naruto gritted his teeth tightly. This guy was like a cat with 9 souls. "I have to be honest, you remind me so much of Jiraiya. You have his angry face, but knowing that he is your..." Orochimaru was interrupted by a fist slamming on his face, sending him against a tree. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes at his speed, and he was sure that the brat couldn't move that fast. How did he get to me so fast? Naruto felt his breath quickened, his hands hurting like crazy, especially his right hand. "Naruto, you fought his supporter that was as strong as Kakashi, and now you're fighting a Sannin for a long time now. You're an Uzumaki, but that doesn't mean you can't get tired," Kurama warned him, knowing that Naruto was tired of fighting 2 strong shinobi. Naruto said nothing as he tried to catch his breath. "Don't worry, Kurama, my seal is ready," Naruto replied as the snake Sannin rushed at him with his sword. Naruto felt this one was the original. He tightened his hand around his katana and rushed at Orochimaru. The redhead knew the seal would work. His godfather would not need to blame himself anymore for what Orochimaru had become. No. He would stop him. The snake grinned, he dodged the brat's attack, and his sword pierced his flesh around his heart. The blood spilt out. "This was no clone. I won." Naruto smiled as his body suddenly disappeared and showed up to Orochimaru's left with no wound and with a big red Rasengan on his right palm, his blood eyes looking at his very soul. "How?" Reality Seal, Mark III. The Rasengan hit him in the chest, the flames around the Rasengan scorching his flesh and bones as the jutsu drilled inside his organs. The body of Orochimaru was sent flying as a red sphere of fire engulfed his body, burning him inside out. Orochimaru screamed as the sphere expanded, destroying trees and ground, reaching 10 meters in diameter. The temperature itself burning trees and grass far away from the explosion. Naruto put his arms around his face, shielding himself from the fire. Windwave flew around him, ripping out trees and grass from their root. The sphere slowly disappeared as Orochimaru's body stopped moving in the air and fell to the ground like a rock, his skin black like coal. Naruto sighed in relief, and he had done it. His Tojiji could stop blaming himself anymore. Orochimaru couldn't do wrong anymore. He breathed heavily, but he suddenly felt a huge sharp pain around his shoulder. He looked at his left to see a slash across his shoulder that stopped at his stomach. Naruto suddenly started coughing blood, and his knees failed him as he fell on the ground, his palm on his mouth trying to stop himself from coughing more blood. "Naruto, don't worry, just stay put, I will heal you," Kurama told him. Naruto kept coughing blood when he suddenly remembered that before his fire Rasengan had flown away with the Sannin, the snake had used his sword on his hand to slash him. The redhead knew that sword was filled with poison, and it didn't help that it was one of the most dangerous poisonous. Naruto's figure was lying on the ground, almost motionless, resting on his back. The redhead wanted to heal himself, but he used all his chakra to use the reality seal. Naruto clenched his teeth tightly as pain spread around his body. He kept clenching his teeth tightly, his fingers tightening around his palm and drawing blood as pain spread more and more. Finally, not being able to hold back, he let out the loudest scream of pain. His body started moving around as more and more pain spread around his body. Kurama kept trying to heal the poison so he wouldn't die, but he could do next to nothing to ease the pain. Naruto kept moving his arms around, hitting the ground, as the pain accumulated around his heart, feeling like the heart itself was expanding around his chest and wanting to come out. His ribs hurting, his chest felt like it was burning and piercing his organs. The redhead gripped his chest tightly as more and more screams echoed throughout the whole forest. He kept on screaming, and his voice was slowly losing sound as blood was leaking out from his nose. Naruto's hand moved to a seal on his right thigh, adding chakra. A syringe suddenly came out. He gripped it carefully around his palm, making sure not to break accidentally. He gripped his teeth again, trying to stop himself from moving. He slowly rolled up the left sleeve and plunged the syringe on his veins. More pain spread as he used the needle. Pulling it out, he threw it away as the pain eased a bit, his arms and legs feeling like rocks. The redhead sighed in relief as the pain was slowly disappearing. Naruto kept trying to slow down his heartbeat. Kurama was almost done with the poison when a dark chuckle reached Naruto's ears. Naruto felt his body freeze. Everything seemed to stop, as his breath was stuck on his throat. He's alive. The footsteps coming closer reached his ear. Naruto turned his head slowly behind him to see Orochimaru standing behind him completely fine. Still, his quickened breath and his left hand gripping his chest was the only indication that he was tired as hell. I knew you would be trouble, but you almost killed me. That seal was no ordinary seal, Orochimaru growled through clenched teeth. Despite using his shedding skin jutsu, he still felt pain all around his body and was tired to continue fighting. The Sannin knew he couldn't shade his skin again with this level of chakra. Naruto tried to move, but the poison had messed him up pretty badly. He tried to stand up, but his body wasn't listening to him. Orochimaru gripped his sword tightly around his hand as he aimed at the Uzumaki. Say goodbye. Fire style, Blue Mouse. Several blue flames hit the Sannin square in the chest, sending him flying to a tree. Naruto-kun, are you alright? Naruto heard the voice of Yujito as she kneeled close to him, checking him. The redhead said nothing as his eyes focused on Orochimaru, who slowly came out of the tree, and his clothes burned around his chest. He glared maliciously at them but immediately jumped up, dodging a slash from Karui and Omoi. Yujito, what do you think you're doing? Karui screamed at her teammates, knowing they were in deep trouble. Before Yujito could respond, Orochimaru glanced at them from where he stood before his body started slowly sinking in the tree. This is not over yet, Uzumaki. His body disappeared, and Naruto spread his senses and couldn't detect him anywhere. He let out a huge breath of relief as his vision got fuzzy, slowly blackening. Naruto felt his body shaking, and he knew Yujito was talking to him as he lost consciousness. Rashi. Rashi rushed towards the village. He knew he needed to go to Konoha as soon as possible. He suddenly felt a chakra spike near his location. Quickly dodging an attack, his eyes turned in time to see several masked Nins. His eyes noticed the word root in their masks. He narrowed his eyes and wondered who they were. They had no symbol to indicate from which village they come from, but Rashi was sure they weren't from Iwa or Kiri. He knew Iwa Umbu didn't attack like this, and the way they were, emotionless, was strange. He prepared his chakra around his arm. 6 dark chains slowly came out from his right sleeve. Demon Monkey, you are to come with us or we will use force. One of them, who Rashi knew was the leader, his chakra level was medium Jonin level. Rashi narrowed his eyes at his tone. His tone was as emotionless as a rock. How about Eno? Goku said with Rashi's body and was about to engulf his hand on lava when 2 root fell down, their necks slashed to the bone, their blood spilling out like a waterfall. Before the 7 other root could even react, 3 others fell down dead as well. The leader turned his head around to see who was attacking, but Rashi took a moment and rushed at him, his hand lava, and thrust his hand deep in his chest and came out the other side. Retray, his head was cut open, his body fell to the ground, dead. Rashi saw the man who was the one who killed them. What caught him by surprise were his clothes. Despite killing them in brutal ways, he had no blood around his sleeves, nowhere around his clothes as far as Roku could see. Then Rashi noticed his mask. He had no eye holes to see. Who are you? That's it for part 9. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.